We're happy to have Dr. Dan Glick here this morning to kind of give the theoretical aspect of church growth. And of course, he'll get into some specifics and talk about what makes a church grow, some of the issues involved, and this is going to be really good. So let me go ahead and introduce you, Dr. Dan Glick.
All right, like he said, I'm going to talk to you about the theoretical, the philosophical, and also some practicalities of the subject of church growth. Actually, I used to teach this class for many years, and then gradually we had to trade positions here, Dr. Bird and I. So I know that he hammers you hard on practicalities, things that you can personally do to help in the process of church growth. What I want to do is talk to you about some of the theory and philosophy and the philosophies that people have when it comes to church growth, and some of the studies that have been done. Now, I think you're reading one of these books by Tom Rainier. Is that right? What is your textbook? Are you reading Surprising Insights from the Recently Unchurched?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk to you briefly about that book and another one that Dr. Rainier did. By the way, I did a church growth study similar to this across the country of Ukraine in 2005. And the results of that are found in this book, but obviously you're not going to be able to read it. It's in Russian. But I'll tell you a little bit about how I modeled my own study there. In fact, I contacted Dr. Rainier and ended up going to it's a seminary down in Louisville, It's a Southern Baptist seminary, but can't remember the name right now. But anyway, met with one of his guys, and he helped me in designing the study in evangelical churches in Ukraine. Now, your book, Surprising Insights, is a qualitative research project. It's not quantitative. Now, let me talk to you about the difference. When you're doing quantitative research, you already have the categories established. Maybe you've been surveyed before, and they'll ask you questions that they have already, they want certain data back from certain questions. So they'll say, how many, do you shop at Walmart? Okay, yes or no? How often do you shop at Walmart a month? Okay, and they might have categories. 1 or 2 times, 3 to 6 times. If you're like some women, it's like 7 to 50 times. All right? So it could be those categories, and you're just identifying how often you go. And then they might say, what do you buy this or that product there? So they're trying to get material for marketing, probably, in a what's called quantitative research project. Quantitative is based on getting a lot of people to participate. It's not very personal. It could be over the phone. It could be in the mail. You may never meet the person who's gathering the data. But in qualitative research, you sit down and gather material in a bit different way, far more personal. It doesn't rely on huge amount of numbers, and you often sit face to face with the person. You certainly talk to them. And more about that a little bit later, but the books that you're reading, or the book that you're reading, both of Rainier's books are based on qualitative research, where you sit with a person and ask a general question and they respond to it, and you end up getting a lot more material and a lot, I believe, better understanding of what makes certain things happen the way they do. So your book takes the approach, the one you're reading, Surprising Insights, of interviewing recent converts to the church. And what they did is they went to so many different denominations, chose so many people that had been converted in a certain time frame, and they asked them, why are you in this church? And how were you brought to Christ? And so all of this material comes from interviewing recent converts. If you want to know why certain churches are growing, wouldn't it stand to reason that you would talk to people who have recently come into the church and made it grow? Yes, you would. So that was the basis of the study that was done. Can you, from your book, tell me what was the number one factor that caused people to come and stay at a given church? Yeah, the pastor and his preaching. What was the percentage of people that they interviewed that indicated that this was one of the factors? 90%. It's a huge figure. What was number two? Doctrine. Haven't we been told for the last 30 years that the doctrine of the church isn't important? What do they tell you is important today?
Friendliness.
Huh?
Friendliness.
Yes.
Programs.
But as far as something going on in the church, what do they tell you that's the big thing? Every worship leader wants you to believe this. Huh? It's the music. Like, you'll build a church if you have some good old-fashioned rock and roll. And you'll have the music, the pop music of today. Did any of these converts mention music? Yes, they did. About 6 out of 100. About 6%, something like that. 3%, 4%. It was under 10%. What do you think is driving the big shift in music in churches? If it's not the new converts, who is it? It's the old converts, right? It's the people that want to go back to what they listened to in their non-converted state. Garen Wolf would love me for this right now. Maybe Jana Pope too. Listen, I'm for contemporary music. Let me say it this way, reword it. I'm for contemporary songs. I'm not always for contemporary music, the way it's done in some places. Contemporary songs just means that you have people writing songs today as well. And even contemporary sounds, there's a certain kind of sound that kind of strikes every generation. But some of what's done in church with dance and bands and praise and worship teams, I mean, it resembles more of a nightclub than a place to worship God. I've been there, I know. I'm also a male. And some things I've seen there seem like it's a prostitution of the gospel in my opinion. Well, it's just interesting that when these new Christians are asked why they came to church and why they stayed, it was the pastor, his preaching, and doctrine was rated number 2. In other words, what he's teaching up there, what he's saying, really does matter. Then it jumped all the way down to what for the friendliness of the members? 49%. Less than 1 out of 2 people even mentioned friendliness, even though roughly 1 out of 2 did. So is it important that you're friendly to people when they come into church? Yes. Is that the sole criteria for which they will decide to stay or not? Of course not. You got to have substance there in your preaching, your teaching. And then it goes down to things, to many other things, like Sunday school is about 1 out of 4, good clean restrooms. There's a lot of things that are adequate parking and space, and there's a lot of other factors there. First impressions. It's important that people don't come in and wander around for a half hour trying to find your restaurant. You might need somebody to say, hey, restrooms are over here. And there's a lot of things that are important to make people feel comfortable when they come. Now, the second book that he actually wrote, I said the second book I'm referring to, he wrote this before writing that one. He wrote that one in about 2001. He wrote this one in about 1995. This takes a different approach. Here he scoped out some of the fastest growing churches of all sizes. He had a formula. You had to have 1 convert for every 25 members of the church in this book, called Effective Evangelistic Churches. And there were other formulas that were part of who they would interview and who they wouldn't as far as the church. But I do remember it was 25 to 1. So if you had 250 people, you had to have at least 10 converts to qualify to be in this study. You could have, and I think you had to have a minimum of maybe 50 people, and then it went up to thousands. And The interesting thing that they found out here was that when they sat down and didn't talk to converts, they talked to the pastor and his staff. What do you attribute your growth to? You see, it's a different question. But again, a very important one. You know what is right at the top? It's amazing. The pulpit is still primary. The preaching, you know what was number 2 on this list? Prayer. They attributed their success to the preaching of the word and to the praying of God's people. And then everything else came after that. Now, I don't want to fill in, I don't want to talk to you about all those things. What I'm trying to tell you is that music never has rated with either of them high. We've been sold that line of goods by, music people. And I'm for music people. The church I pastor now, the music is outstanding. What we heard last Sunday is just beautiful. The playing of the guitars, the offertory, the special song with a soundtrack by Jacinda Cravens. I love good music. And it's very important to people, but it tends to be more important to people who've been in the church for 10 years or more than for new people coming in. You don't attract them with music. If they want to hear their style of music, they've got plenty of places to hear it. Everywhere. Not only out there, but right here, and they can exercise and listen to that. So they don't come to your church because of your music. Sometimes people switch churches from one church to another because of music. But they don't come just because they think you're going to do hymns better than anyone else. The new converts. They don't even know stuff like that. It's like, who's standing up there speaking? And do I believe in him? Do I like what he's saying? Oh, the singing's nice. Yeah, I like that. But that is a more mature Christian's perspective. That's what these studies have found. And preaching and praying are still the bottom line. Put every plan into place you want. If you don't pray, it's not going to be a work of God. It's just going to be a work of man. And these leaders know it, and they act on it.